Okay, so I'm going to go to a live demonstration now, but before I do that, are there any questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay, and I'm going to call out a few highlights on this one. So I'm going to show how you can search. One of the important concepts of an archive is that you don't require technical expertise to get useful business data, right? If you need to ask for help to find something in an archive, it's not really doing its job, right? And like I was mentioning with those clinicians at Leahy Health, right? I'm also going to show you how you have a UI that requires no training and is appropriate for the role of the user. So most of the users are just doing research in a given archive holding from some application, but some of the users need to administer the archive as a records manager, and some people need to run it as if they're an applications admin, right? And they're responsible for storage and encryption and security and all that kind of stuff, right? So we want to have a UI that's appropriate for them, but the end users don't really care about storage or the database size or any of that kind of stuff, so we need to segregate the UI, and I'll show you how all of those are available out of the box. I'm also going to show you how we can scale this, right? Because we know that we might add other applications to it, and we want it to scale more inexpensively than the original application did, right? We want it to be able to handle a lot more volume at a lot lower cost. And by the way, I didn't have a chance today because we don't have HDMI, but a lot of times I run the demo on a Raspberry Pi just to show how efficient it is. And this one runs $35, and I do lessons with kids at the library down in Dallas all the time using these. And I was excited to demo on it today, but we just didn't have the chance because of these plugins. Here's another one. We used to brand and give these away at EMC just to kind of show off how skinny it is, right? And then we have options for the cloud, and I'll show you a little bit of that. So these are just some call outs for the demonstration. Okay, so this is the UI, and by the way, it's AngularJS and HTML5, so there's no plugin required. You know, it feels the way most users expect a web app to behave today, right? And I'm going to go in first as Emma, and Emma is just a line of business. She's in line of business, right? She's in finance. This year she works for the CFO, right? And she heard that there was some trades last year at Opentext, and those trades were higher than the stock ever traded for. They were actually for about $100, you know, or 90 and change, and it never traded at that. So that's kind of suspicious, and we need to see why. You know, you got to look out for insider trading. Sarbanes-Oxley requires some of that. So I'm going to log into this UI. You know, doesn't require any install. Just need a web browser. Any kind of web browser will work. And you'll see that Emma has a list of applications that have been archived to the system. And I'm going to look for the trades one. There it is, trades. And we have a couple of searches that you can do. I'm just going to look for a simple set of trades for Opentext stock. So I'm just trying to see if there's any shady trades out there for Opentext stock. And sure enough, I got a bunch of trades, but most of them look reasonable, like 60 looks reasonable. Wait a second, 95, that shouldn't be there. Okay, let's take a look at it. Let's sort them by price. There you go. So these are some of the high trades, and those are higher than they should be. So I think I probably just need to save a record of this and maybe show it to somebody else, maybe email them a spreadsheet that shows these trades that I just researched that maybe we need to look into a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead. And by the way, each one of these has a I can open these records, and these look like just a regular database record, but you'll notice that they're associated with a lot of other files, like a PDF file. And if I wanted to, I could, or even a recording from the call center where somebody said, hey, you know, buy it at 99 or something like that, right? You can have that recording also saved there in the same archive. So we don't care if it's structured or unstructured data. So I can just view the PDF file right here if I want, or I can download it and run it somewhere else. But I'm going to go ahead and just select these top 10 shady trades, I'll call them. And yeah, I can select all of them, or I'm just going to export the ones I've selected now, which is 10 of them. And I can export them into a CSV, which is open, but will come up in Excel, for example, right? And then we can do a report on that. We can email it to somebody else. And I'm just going to download that now. And it's going to make a background request, and then when it's done, that report will be available to me. I can just go into background requests and grab it. So Emma's done her job, right? And I was told there were some shady trades. She went in without any training, without ever going into the system before. She used her network credentials, got into the system, found the stuff she's allowed to see, and now she pulled out some data to share with somebody else. And she's done. So Emma went in and out, and she did her line of business research like she was required to do. And she emailed it to Rita, and Rita said that her job is compliance in this division, and she's like, okay, uh-oh, this looks like something I need to look into. So I'm going to go into this too. So let me go in now as Rita, the records manager. Okay, and you'll see Rita has the same interface more or less, but we've got these extra tabs like dashboard and compliance. But let's first just look into those same trades, you know, to do. What Rita's probably going to do is have to put them on a legal hold of some sort, right? And then maybe look into them a little more. So she's going to do the same search first. Now she looked at the spreadsheet that was emailed to her, and now she's going to just pull up the same records, sort in the same way. Okay, now if I want to, I can select it by before, but you'll notice a difference now. She has the opportunity to put them on a legal hold, right? And that means that they can't be deleted. Now, one of the things that's nice about Infoarchive is that not only can we archive the data and hang on to it in a mutable form as long as we want, we can automatically delete the data once we no longer need it. It can have retention policies applied and enforced in a defensible fashion so that if later you're asked what happened to that record you had to hang on to for 10 years, you can say, here's the record of me hanging on to it for 10 years, and here's the record of me disposing of it, right, in a way that auditors will accept. Again, from the same UI, this simple HTML5 UI that doesn't require any special client software. Okay, so I've taken these records here that are suspicious, and I'm going to put them on hold. And we have a lot of different holds available, but I think the traits hold is appropriate for this one. And I could limit this by role for individual users, you know, if I don't want them to use certain holds. I can limit them by application. I'm just going to call it shady. Trades 6. Okay, so I've created this legal hold now, and these records cannot be automatically disposed of or purged in any way until such time that whoever is authorized to release a hold releases that hold. And then we'll still have a record that the hold was applied to these records and then they were deleted at this time.
That means if you are an archive job or whatnot, it's going to skip over those?
Correct. Yeah, if you have a purge that runs, it will not touch these batches. So I can take a look at the holds that are currently out there, and I can see I have a couple of them that I've done. And I can take a look at this one specifically if I want. And you can see that I've got these 10 records. And if I wanted to, I could apply special new retention policies to this. I could delete the shady trade record altogether if I want. Now, other things that Rita might have to do in her job, besides just putting this on legal hold, is maybe she needs to purge data. And here's an example of a list of data that she may be authorized to purge. If she wanted to, she could just approve that, and it'll disappear. And you can see we've got a few thousand records here she can delete. They basically already met their retention policy, and now they're just taking up space. And maybe they represent a liability, right? Data you don't want to hang on to anymore because somebody might, you know, say it's discoverable in court, right? You don't want to pay for the records that are going to get you in trouble too, right? So we can also reject that and say, okay, look, I'm not going to throw this out now because I'm concerned about this legal action right now. I'm So, and we can automate it so that you don't have to pull the trigger to do a purge. It's automatic too. It can go either way. If I wanted to, Rita could also create new retention sets and policies like legal hold. Let me go into her compliance tab in order to do that kind of stuff. So you can see the trades policy is in use, and if she wanted to, she could edit that policy for any new legal holds that come up in the future, or she could add a new retention policy, and that policy can be can even receive events from outside systems. I would call that event-based or a mixed policy, like we wait for 10 years after the customer cancels a contract, and then we wait for 10 more years, and then we delete the record, right? We can apply that to this record when it comes into the system. And this can be authored by Rita in the same UI, fully supported, fully documented. It's not a science project for the records manager to get this stuff done. Okay, now she also has a dashboard available to her where she can see how the data is being used from a compliance perspective. And we can see that there's a billing dispute hold and there's a trades hold, and these holds are being applied to a single application. There's a couple of purges coming up, and if I want to see how many records will be disposed of on given dates or are ready to be disposed of, I can see that too. You can see what our coverage is. So this is the view of the archive from the compliance officer's view. So Rita's done her job, but she calls Sue, the super user. She's the administrator of the system, the app admin, and she also has a job that she needs to do. They told her, I'm worried about this data, and we're already kind of getting in trouble for this last breach. So I think we need to put all this stuff that I have to put on legal hold in an encrypted data store. I want it fully encrypted at all times. I don't want it to sit there open. I don't even want a rogue admin to be able to get to it, right? So Sue has to now add an encrypted data store to this system. So I'm going to log in now as Sue, the super user. Okay, now you see Sue has a couple more tabs. It looks the same as before, but you'll see that Sue, for example, has a dashboard that tells her a little bit more about the data makeup, not just retention policies and all the different applications and what data makeup they have and how many records they have and so on. She also has access to compliance, but Sue has this new tab. And this new tab allows her to federate different databases or create new XML databases. She can add file stores, and she wants to add a file store that goes out on the cloud. Let's say you guys don't want to worry about managing backup anymore, and you've got this big pile of archive data that you need to store in the cloud. Instead of storing it on a local volume, I can use Amazon S3 cloud storage, which is one of the least expensive cloud storage options you have. And you can throw some encrypted batches out there so you don't have to worry about them on house, but then you've already got DR and HA for that data. And so I just type in the name of it and the credentials, and now I have S3 storage connected to my Infoarchive system, even if it's on-prem. And now I can take advantage of scalable cloud storage, without having to move entirely to the cloud. And I might have to encrypt it after I do that, so I might use existing encryption methods that are available on my system, or I can add a new encryption method that's available, that can be made available on my system. And here's a couple of service providers that we have. When I say service provider, I just mean different types of encryption processes that you may have available in your operating system. Now, I can manage the permissions that, as an administrator, of course, I have to determine what Rita can do versus what Sue can do versus what Emma can do. And I can determine what different applications they have access to based on groups. And how do we get our groups? From Active Directory domain controllers. So the credentials of all the users and whether or not they can get into the system and what role they have, like what tabs they see on top, it's all a function of what your Active Directory domain controller sets it up for, right? So you don't have to, your administrators in Infoarchive don't have to worry about managing security for all the users, right? That's going to be managed by your Active Directory domain controller, just like they do today. And if a user leaves, they immediately won't be able to get into the system because they won't be able to authenticate, right? They won't be able to get in their laptop, right?
already? Is that something that we can do?
Yeah, I think, we do it, Prajna, how are they doing it? Active Directory or you're just adding it?
They're going through single sign-on, but in terms of like, is this user an admin versus is this a normal user?
They maintain it.
We maintain that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's not through Active Directory.
That's not. Somebody goes manually create the user and grant access to that.
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
and that, so here the recommendation is we can send through our Active Directory.
Yes. If you want to, you can also just set them up manually in the local to the system.
But we don't necessarily need to give every user an access, right?
Right.
How do we ensure on our end? Every user will be on our Active Directory, but not necessarily all the users on the Active Directory needs to be on the.
Just like you do file shares, it's just group membership. If they're in a
It's special
particular
authorization,
group.
maybe you have to give it to them to their access. Or I would prefer the same as like other application, cloud applications we do.
Okay.
Have the user authentication process here, but it comes through the access request.
Okay.
That's something we can work on.
Okay. Now, what else can I show you guys? Let me see if.
Pause for a minute and just say
Yeah.
if anybody have any questions so far what they have seen. So this will be a good opportunity to see what you have seen and what's your thoughts and where else you could leverage this application.
So for
Anyone?
me, at least the biggest noticeable thing here is setting up all these, retention period policies and all of these
Compliance.
can be done by
Yeah.
the users themselves. We don't need to, I don't think it needs an IT guy to.
So I guess we can set up a policy and say, hey, for this
This
type of
this type of the
document,
document.
this is the retention period and then.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I like that.
And you can do it by application. So for a given application, like this is the tickets application, everything can have the same policy by default when it comes in. Or you can divide it up and say, this type of data in this application can be, you can get as fine grained as you want. Generally, I recommend one retention policy per application.
Okay.
A lot of people kind of over-design their retention policy. And that's kind of one thing we reined in on Infoarchive. Documentum and Opentext Content Server, they have a lot of retention policies. And it makes sense if you want to get really fine-grained, but most people never use all that stuff. It makes sense to just be able to make them when you need them, and just have a couple of them, that like 7 years, 10 years, immediate, permanent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
typically that's what
Yeah.
it matters for every department, right? Legally, 5,
Yeah.
7, 10, whatever it is, and then we can come up with the groups.
Yeah.
And then we decide.
I think for our discussion, the application type corresponds to our document.
Our doc types, yeah.
Do you guys have like a big bucket record schedule, or people really well defined?
Pretty defined by the years, the retention policy is by department.
So it's a departmental.
Yeah, like warranty will have one,
Right.
and then the credits will have one,
Gotcha.
and then
So every
different,
department's
every
How
department.
does that work on acquisitions? You guys acquired a company, you bring in their PeopleSoft system, for example. Do you retain that entire system for 10 years or whatnot?
I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah. I'm not sure, because really what we're talking about here is what we currently have defined in our legal document retention
Okay.
policy. It doesn't touch on like systems and things like that. That's more on the IT side. I'm not sure what happens with that.
The closest thing that I would think of is Kaiser War, and they have their old system, it's still running.
Kaiser Warren.
Yeah.
But still they go by our legal.
The thought process is that we would integrate that into
Yeah,
our
that we're
current
trying, I think
environment.
Andy can speak to it, I think we're trying to make a one role for corporate role, but
Yeah.
may not necessarily work in every area. We have European, lot of non-SAP systems we have out there, which is, doesn't touch our grounds, it's in Europe somewhere.
Okay. Gotcha.
But for now, our focus is mainly on this Pedagio and
Yeah.
slowly expand to other business units wherever it's possible. That's it.
Yeah, this is highly scalable. We charge by the terabyte on it, and so it's not by user at all. And so you start off with a couple of terabytes, you roll something in, you decide you like this works, other people decide they want to join in on this and start decommissioning other systems, then you just add terabytes at that point.
And there was one point that I didn't make earlier that I probably should highlight, and I'm talking about search without IT. Something that comes up all the time is you have an archive of data, like this trade archive, but the users want a new search, right? And they'll open an IT ticket and somebody goes out and writes some SQL, right? And that kind of slows things down, and it would be better to just be able to make a search WYSIWYG on the fly and then use it, right? But unfortunately, there's not a lot of tools to do that. We tried to build it into this UI though. So I went in as Sue because she has the privileges, but you could grant it to business analysts or even end users that you trust to create new searches. And there's even a production process where it goes into draft and then into production, so you don't have to migrate it between systems. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new search in the trades archive, and I'll just call it search test. And you can see we've already got a schema for trades. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that schema because we've already archived some data from it. And I'm just going to say that I'm going to use all this data to search, like the date and the trade ID and the last name and the ticker. And this is all already defined in the XML. That's why we know it. That's why we don't need to get really tricky with writing into code. And we can if we want. If we want to get sophisticated with it, we have the availability. It's exposed in the UI. But we can also just make it simple for the end users. Just check boxes on what they want to see in the results set, like the trade ID and the customer.
These fields are all based on how the data, like it's like indexed
Correct.
before it loaded in.
Well, it's
the
XML.
system.
When we bring it in, it's XML. So it's self-describing, and it can be parsed, and you can find the fields and then just use them in this. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on data analysis. Once you have the XML, you can get the
How
fields you need.
about, what do you mean exactly XML? So how about the documents? For example, right now, I as an user, I print the document and give it to Ian, and he will put the indexing page like a cover page and then drop it to the Convergia where the document gets scanned and send it to Paragio. So where is this XML get created? Are you expecting this to be coming out of Convergia or?
Well, okay, so Prodagio has a relational database that describes the metadata on each image, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's our XML data. That's fed in as XML data. Now, if we OCR the actual image, then we can also expose that as XML data
Okay.
and make that searchable as well. But even if it's just an image, we can still search the metadata around it, which is exactly how Prodagio does it today. It uses that metadata in the relational database to find what you want.
Okay. I heard one question, what is OCR? It's optimal characteristic recognition. It reads through the file to identify what, like a page I given the page, what image, what characters I have. Its system reads through it. That's a technology.
So it takes a flat document, scans it, extracts the information that you want extracted off of that, and now you've got that in electronic format.
Okay.
The data, and that can be routed to other systems, can be used for metadata to search on,
Okay.
or maybe other ones.
How does this play in our scenario right now?
Like we
OCR.
are restricted to the metadata that we have.
Oh, okay. Restricted metadata which is coming out of Paragio for now. What we need to bring from Paragio to Opentext. But what about tomorrow or when the new files coming out of these each department? What options could we have there?
Yeah, so Max, if they're bringing in new images, scanning and sending in directly,
Okay, just forget about the scanning
Okay.
also. Just openly think about, okay, one option, one task is we have to bring everything what's available in Paragio, move it to the
Right,
new tool.
correct.
That's option one. That is one task. Task number two, okay, once the Opentext is up and running, going forward, all these departments will be sending the document. So all this still have to print and go through Convergia and send it to Opentext, or do we have any better options? Can you speak about that?
If you have, when you're doing indexing, you're creating metadata, right?
Convergia,
Well, is that a question or is that a statement?
Well, generally when I say indexing,
Yes.
what I mean is I've got images and I'm applying metadata that then goes into some relational database that I can search on, and that's how most. And then if I want, I can OCR it, and then even get more metadata that I extract out of that text, and I can also search the text, right?
Yes.
And so when you do that now, so there's other processes that Opentext has that can do that same thing, right? And then send that to Infoarchive as XML that we can then search on and make available. So we can do an alternative process if you want, right? But the thing about Infoarchive is it's the end state. It's where it's the archive where it's fixed. But when we put it there, it's read only. We're not going to update it anymore. Now,
I completely get
yeah.
it, but my question is more like, how do I get into there? How would I forget about right now? Paragio is the place where you will get the images and you will get the metadata. That once that is all done, you brought all my 7 million documents, whatever so far we have. But going forward, we start using the Infoarchiving for put more documents into it. So how do I bring them into your Infoarchive? What options do you have?
The same thing. It's just like active archiving. We just take it in batches and move it over. If it's the same schema, if the metadata structure is the same as the previous one, then we can put it into the same holding, same application holding, or we can just create a new application for the new. If you expand the schema, you just create. It has more fields, right? Then you can just create another application and archive to that one, and you can search across both of them.
Yeah. So
as if it's one.
maybe we take a step back. Ian, you don't index any of this information. What you do,
No,
right?
we
So
don't
he's,
do it.
he's sending it. So
Converger's doing
he's sending it to Converger.
Converger and
Converger is the one
Converger
that
doing
provides the
it.
metadata.
Yeah.
So we
why
can take it from
So that
Converger.
wouldn't be different in the future. I mean, we still go through Converger, and then Converger would provide the metadata that they're going to use for tagging these images.
If
Right.
you wanted to keep that step in.
Right.
Let's
Right.
just
But
say,
the-
if
but
you want to
the-
get rid of converges down the road.
Yeah.
and you
What
wanted to-
options do I
yes,
have? That is
You
what
can
I was.
bypass them, and what they're manually keying or however they're doing that, we can bypass that and automate some of those steps where we could, whatever information comes with that document. So let's say he's got something he's sending over on upload. If there's already metadata or information associated with
All
that,
that, just take a real example. All that he has is the series of email thread with an
Okay.
attachment of image. So right now what's happening, he printing it out, giving it to Converger, they're scanning back and sending it to Paragio. So that's Paragio getting the images as well as the metadata, so that's where they're,
Prodagio is
That's
adding that metadata.
yeah, the Paragio is adding that
Is it
metadata.
something they're keying or they scanning a
No,
cover image
Converger
or-
keying
Converger
in
is
and
keying
sending
in,
it.
okay.
So that's what it's happening, right? So how would we, so forget about this step, right? Sending it to Converger, Converger keying
Right.
in and sending it to Paragio. How can I auto transfer whatever Ian have it directly to?
So he can save
Infoarchive.
off the image file, JPEG, whatever it is. He can
Yeah.
save that off into a folder. We talked this last time, having a drive, some spot out there.
Okay.
And then a batch file can run from Infoarchive to go pull that and import it in for you. That can be every 5 minutes, it can be every night at midnight, it can be once a week, however you want to do that. We can run
Does
that
your
batch.
batch file reach the image and prepares the what
Well,
type
that's
of, how
the
does
catch.
it?
So if you wanted to do that, then we have to add an OCR step in there to do what Convergence is doing. But instead of manually keying, the OCR would open up the image electronically. It would pull the fields that you want pulled, assign that as metadata, and then that would come with the batch at that point. So we can, I sound like George Bush, we can electronify the situation there for you and cut out that manual step if you want on there. It's just, it would have to be replaced with something. And if we're going the electronic route, then OCR, we've got OCR tools that we use now that we can offer up to that would fit there for you. If you're already using an OCR tool internally, then we can take advantage of that possibly. But along with acquiring Documentum, we acquired Captiva. So we've got the Captiva OCR tool as well that's part of Opentext now.
So in cases where we can't do that, let's say where we can't use OCR, let's say there's an email somewhere.
Or handwritten
Right.
documents become very difficult to OCR.
Right, we can't do OCR for some document. Even Converger, when we talk to them, they mentioned that they're doing OCR for some, but others they're having people in their offshore locations,
Right,
keying in all
sure.
that, right? So what can we do in those situations where we can't do
So
OCR?
options, and I'll let Max correct me on this, what I typically see across any application we can have a when they save that image off, we can have a pop-up box pull in, and the user has to fill in that information right there that would assign that metadata on there. It can come over just as a flat file with no metadata on there. And is there any other thing that I'm missing on that?
No,
It's OCR or somebody's got to enter it, one of the two. Now,
So
instead
for
of
people to enter it, you're saying you can have some mechanism to
Right.
ask them to enter it.
Yes, yeah, we can have a pop-up window of some type of application running that's gonna map the metadata fields to that
You
form.
have it here on the
You know,
table.
form
Yeah,
pops
is
up.
it?
So, now the
It's
form
right
can be
there
a
on
little
the
box.
Oh, here in the middle.
And out of that box, you can force feed the information. So a lot of times where people get in trouble entering their own metadata is when somebody has free form. They can put,
Yeah, you
just
can
try to
do it.
spell my name in there, yeah.
Here
So what
you
we
have
try
to
to
use
do
the
is,
liquid.
you have big boxes, you have
Need
there,
the spray, I think.
you know, with these three options.
Spray.
five options. And then we pick from that, pick from that, pick from that, and you know those are standard options that are mapped to these people.
I can go and bring it. I
That's
have
the
the
simplest
metadata.
way.
I go and bring it.
So you always have a process where you capture it, capture an image, right? And then you process it, right? And then you, in our case, we're gonna archive it, right? Now, you probably have applications that have already done this, and then Infoarchive does the archive step where we retain it, and then we have disposition too, right? And then we dispose of it, and Infoarchive is meant to do this in a defensible way for as many records and files or combinations of them as you want, and make it really easy to do search and retrieval on that, right? And to automate this as much as possible, to make this step as dependable and as least, as inexpensive as possible, right? What you're talking about, I think, is processing, right? Which is, now that I have stuff coming in, I need to extract useful metadata to make it more,
This
way to
is,
search it, right?
Yeah.
no, this is to add more, this is, I wouldn't say a transaction system, but we'll keep adding more documents to this.
It's
Right.
just archiving. I need to
Oh,
add
right.
more archiving documents. How would I do that?
Oh, right, and so,
Without, is there a mandatory you have to have the metadata?
I see, so you wanna
Every
stick it in the archive, but then add metadata later? Is that what you're getting at? Or have maybe in the archive, go out and do the OCR after the fact and then apply
How
that?
do we keep adding data?
Oh, you can do them in batches, just
Okay.
every batch.
Yeah, but am I gonna, like he was saying, it's either OCR or somebody keys it in. So how is the input? How is the input into your system? Is it being keyed direct into your system? Is it a file here that I send it here, attached to the image? How do we all get data continuously every day into the
Right.
system?
So it's done in batches, and when it comes to like indexing, like you're talking about, keying in the data, that's done in another application before you get to Infoarchive, right? We're assuming that that's already been done somewhere else,
What if
and
we
then it
don't have
comes in.
something else? Can we do it in Infoarchive? Or can we do it just before?
You just have to have a way to create the data in XML, or that's then converted to XML and pushed over. So there's still, basically, I know what you're trying to do, right? You have this application that does the processing that you want to get rid of, and you want the process of capturing and indexing done straight into Infoarchive, so we don't have to worry about anything else. We don't have that in this product. We have other products that'll do that and put it in. Now, if you just want to have a place to keep it short term, and then go through this loop where, okay, I've got my temporary block, and now I go back and process it, and now I have my final block, and I put it back in, I can do that, and then delete this one after I get the updated one, I can do that. But I still need an application to do the indexing, because it's just XML in a batch when it comes in.
So
So-
are you guys thinking about, so if we bypass conversion and any scanning, like uploading a document directly into the archive, is that, basically that's the question that I hear.
Yeah.
How can I just, go
Bypass
beyond,
this manual process and this rescanning process and directly send it.
can
Because
PM send it directly
everything
into the
is in
archive?
the emails. Whatever Ian getting is printed from emails or electronic form, which is signed by somebody, sent through an email. Those are all the copies that they're printing and then rescanning it and convert just reading through and then storing it in Infoarchive. So, okay, how would we eliminate that manual process? What benefit are we?
Well, okay, so right now, like for example, right now you're receiving, somebody sending an email, right? You can
Correct.
send an email to the archive and it'll wind up in a batch, right?
Okay.
The email is completely understandable by Infoarchive, and you can have a watched directory, for example, or a watched email address that can receive the emails, including files in there, and then ingest them and apply the correct metadata in XML format and use that.
How do I come
but
up
you
with
have
the
to-
metadata in XML?
Well, you got to stand up a process that says, here's an email. Well, everybody understands email, right? You have a subject and a to and a from and all that, and it'll just take all that and the attachments and stick it in a holding. Okay, but you need a file and XML describing the file,
So,
and that's enough to archive it.
so in an email case, my metadata will be from to my subject and
Common fields on
Yeah.
the
common
email.
fields, right, and my date, that would be my metadata.
Yeah.
And then my images will be that, so those will be my subject fields. So if
Yeah.
I want anything that is
Mhm.
in the
On the
images,
document.
I gotta go into a capture process.
Yes.
Right, you have
correct.
that Captiva.
Somehow we have to sort of electronify
Yeah.
that manual process that's
Yeah.
going on. And that's honestly, this is what Opentext does. This is our whole goal in life, is to automate every process imaginable.
Yeah.
Anything somebody's doing manually, can we put a workflow around it? Can we automate steps? Can we take away the manual process of printing out, rescanning, and doing that whole step and going forward for
It's just
companies?
that getting stuff out of images is never,
Yeah.
Right, and so there's, we have
So
workflow,
start-
we have workflow tools, we have other things that we can add to this that are above and beyond what we've been talking
Yeah.
about so far.
Like Opentext Capture Center.
Capture Center, and we do this with invoices, we do it with sales orders, we do it with vendor onboarding, we do it all kinds of different things that we do in this area. But,
What is that module called? It's another module?
well, the invoice one is vendor invoice management, and then the onboarding of anything else, so the vendor documents or sales orders and that type of thing, the electronic process, we call it digital content processing, DCP, which is basically the same process. It's capturing it from email or scanning a document, OCRing it, and then starting the workflow that automates
Just
that
store it
process.
into
Yeah.
Info.
But somehow we have to get to the metadata that you're wanting. And so it's either gonna be something we extract from whatever fields are given to us in an email, or we're gonna have to look at that image now where Convergys, or those guys, where they're printing that out, having paper and rescanning it, we bypass that process. We just open the software will open the document itself, scan it, extract what we need to extract from it, and close it back and send it. But that's an extra step that we don't have in our proposal. We don't have that piece of the application included.
Yes, Infoarchive covers these parts, but not these parts. And we have lots of great tools in Opentext that we'd be glad to talk to you about that cover these.
Right, but they're not included
It's
in the
not
story.
what
up
I'm
to this
showing
point.
you guys today, that's all.
Right, but what you were offering earlier is, if you wanna do it manually, you can enable that, so whenever I put this document in this folder, then I can have it, Opentext, send me a pop-up so I can enter my invoice number, my whatever.
Yeah, and that's not included in our proposal up to this point too. That's an add-on that would allow us to pull that form in there. And basically, when somebody opens it, they would get a pop-up box that would have 1 question to 5 questions for them, whatever it may be. We can force a pull down for each one of those, so they're not free keying and making spelling errors and that type of thing. They pick from these 3, they pick from these 5, they pick from these 2. And that's gonna be your fields that are populated here. Those fields are gonna tie directly into here with that image.
And then they can attach the image.
Yeah, the image would be attached to that, and so that information would really flow behind the image, or underneath it. Okay, so when they search for it, those are the images they would find. Okay, so let's say the first pull-down box was just A, B, or C. And we pick A, we save it, the image goes with that metadata now. Now when we import it into here and somebody goes and searches, they search for A, all the A's will pop up. Every image that has A as that metadata field. Now that metadata field may be Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. It may be USA, France. It could be anything that you want them to be that are aligned with your business process on there. But we could have it. We have to get that information somehow. So your third-party company you're using now, they're printing out and then they're keying something in and rescanning it back in, or they're using a cover page with a barcode or something along those lines. They're doing something manual now that you're paying for. What we're proposing is erase the manual process, automate it, if we can't OCR it for some reason, then we're gonna have a pop-up box where your users just pick. They're doing that step without printing them out, doing it and rescanning it. We're taking away all of that noise.
So when you start talking OCR, then you're talking about different templates for different type of documents.
Right. Well, potentially.
So we have a, if we're talking about invoice images, we have a special OCR engine that we created called Invoice Capture Center, ICC. It's built for invoices. So it learns the most common styles of invoices out there, and it learns on the fly, so it becomes repeatable. So we start with, if we can get 70% accuracy, we get to 80% accuracy, get 90, 95, 97%. So yes, there's sometimes where it's not going to recognize, you're right. It's never gonna be perfect out there, but it automates a lot of those steps out there. Now, where that becomes really useful, that wasn't built for this, that was built for our invoice management tool. So kind of like your Predagio, we have one that's built specifically for SAP and only for SAP. That's what ICC was built for, but it knows how to go pull this information and then cross-reference it with SAP to be able to check the vendor master file to be sure that that's the right vendor number, that type of thing. It can go do PO matching and can automatically correct information or throw a flag up just to an AP clerk that can go in and say, oh, I need to only handle these exceptions. I can go in and say, okay, it thought this 8 was a 3, hit the 8, boom, we go to the next, submit, we go. And it automates that entire process. That's what it was built for. So we can take some of that knowledge and intelligence and bring it over and do something like this. But above all of this, you have to somehow get that metadata in there if you're going to continue to populate and you want that metadata associated with it. Where is that metadata coming from? If there's a place we can go get it, then we can go get it. But if there's not a place, if it's just a PDF file coming as an attachment to an email, there's nothing there for us to grab other than who the email's from, the date, that type of thing, unless we open it, OCR it, extract it, and now we've got that metadata tied to it.
So right now, we have the codes as an example. I know it's not currently using desktop, using it from last August or September. But there is a one department, they directly go to Predagio and they upload all their PDFs directly into Predagio contract management under codes section. So can we have something like that for each department here? And then Infoarchive, I was showing you right on the other day, we have different document types. Codes was one, warranty documents, like vendor initiation documents are one, tax documents are one document. Can we have these different type of documents, in your sense, I think different applications, but in nothing but a different document or different departments under the archiving, and then grant and access to, for example, Eon, he knows what is this document. Can he go directly to archive and pick, select the appropriate document type and upload the documents into it directly?
It would be a middle step.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can make a place where he can place, files and any metadata manifest, and then that can be ingested into the archive. If you want to make that available to him, you can do that. Typically, we have a batch process that runs in the background to move stuff out of the system you're archiving from. It's typically not a custodial process where end users add stuff individually, but there are situations where, like in legal e-discovery cases, where they're using the archive for a lot of things, including e-discovery stuff. So they'll grab a bunch of files, they'll drop it in a certain file share or whatever, and then it'll be ingested into the repository. And they'll leave behind a receipt on the file system, like, I got all these files, thanks, and then it's in the archive. But typically it's not used as a custodial system where end users are throwing in onesies, twosies. That makes sense? But we can certainly enable that with a Dropbox, and a lot of people use it that way, or an email address you send stuff to, and then it goes in.
The key is pulling that metadata.
Well, yeah, and like I said, you can have it as a way station if you want just an easy way station to throw stuff in temporarily, and then it's a really short retention policy, like 2 weeks, and then you put it through processing, delete the original batch, and then have a new batch where it's processed. You can do that, but then, at some point, that might be more work than just using a more active document system that's supposed to process stuff. Like Opentext Content Server has some internal processing capabilities, right? The Opentext Capture Center, the invoice processing, all those are built to do this sort of processing, right?
Yeah, what I feel is, so I can get the solution for right now for replacing Paragio, means whatever is in there to bring it in. But that's not the only goal of us, and our goal is how we're gonna keep adding more, because that's the one we wanted to keep add more and more and more.
Right, and it's read-only, right? I mean, once you create them, they're not gonna change anymore until you
Yeah,
expose
it's
them.
not gonna be changed, but even to add, it seems like a difficulty, you still have to go through the same
Same
whole
process, we'll get the same process through.
Right. Yeah, it's not gonna replace active document functionality and like processing and capture functionality. The Infoarchive is meant to be the end state, right? Not it doesn't do the processing. We can add the processing per application, right? But you still have that burden if you want to. Now, a lot of times people if they have an active application, they just keep it alive. It does the processing and then stuff goes into the archive when they're done, right? But it sounds like you just want to replace an active application and use Infoarchive as the replacement for the active application. And I'm just saying it can do some of it, like the storage and the search and retrieval, and make that really easy. But it's not going to do the processing part. So the processing part that you want to do, where you get metadata associated with files, we have tools to automate that process, but it's not just in Infoarchive. That's all we're
So
saying.
the invoices that you're talking about, this other stage, will be coming in, they're not going into your new AP system? They're just images coming in and you're just storing these images?
The
But
newer
just-
ones will
Talking
go,
about
but
Newer ones will go, but the other departments who are in touch AP team, like tax won't touch AP system.
So you're just wanting to stick those
Warranty
documents?
audit, that's what we have been.
Okay.
so some of the documents that we have is, let's say for example, new vendor creation document. Whenever we have a new vendor, somebody makes a request or there's a form they
Yes.
need to fill out, we need to archive that form, right? So we'll be adding more vendors, and as we have those forms, we want to stick it in here. So we don't do that anything, and in future we'll go back and search, hey, if we have this vendor, if there's an audit or something.
Yeah, so that stage of it isn't a decommissioning and transfer over, that's using it as an archive repository that they will continue to add to in the future.
Right, and you can it's active archiving is a perfectly legitimate thing, but to do with it, but you still need something else to do that processing.
Yeah.
If we know a lot about the files that are coming in, we can set up a processor, an automated processor, like we have that all the time where we have PDF files and we're converting them to AFPs or TIFFs or something open that just runs in the background. When they dump the files, they get cleaned up and then put in batches. But it sounds like there's a little bit more human touch here, right? Because we need to do some indexing potentially.
Now, they can keep their current solution, I keep
They
pointing to
don't
you,
have to.
mentioned it like on there. You can keep that when they're printing and,
I mean, it kind of sounds like we need to have a bit broader discussion about the process that you want to automate. And it's more than just archiving,
Sure.
right? And we can come up with a solution that I think will work. And I think if you want to come to us for all of it, I know we can help. But it's going to be more than just this one solution. And if I try to force this whole solution just into Infoarchive, I'm going to do it a disservice because it doesn't do everything. There's some things that have to happen
That's good
before
to
it
know,
goes
but
in.
that's not the only goal of us to just bring works in there, to put them in there. Our goal is to going forward also how we can keep adding them more.
Right.
But at the same time streamline the existing process. We have a ton of manual process going through, somebody printing and scanning and then putting back in there. How would we minimize that? That's been there from the day one.
So you guys did a call with Ryan last week, right?
Colosso, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that Ryan's team does, and then we'll kind of come up with a more holistic solution. We can definitely do what you want to do and have Infoarchive as the search and retrieve platform and the archive platform. I'm just saying that we can use the RESTful services to even present the files as they come in and index them. It just might not be the best way to do it. I think that we can get another solution that's optimized for that piece as things go in. and maybe make it better than the Convergys solution you have now. You just have to take a look. It's just more, I don't want to try to give you a pat answer right now when I'm really just talking about Infoarchive.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think historically, obviously, we have Redagio going away, so we have to have a solution for that. Because, again, my customer master team literally prints out everything, they send it over to Ian, and magically it gets indexed. So
Right.
we don't do that indexing process, right?
Right.
So that's the piece that seems to be the gap here that we're all missing.
Right.
Yeah, automating it would be great, but we have to have that step, otherwise it doesn't work.
Right, so for day forward stuff, you still need to process, and we need more than just Infoarchive to do that process.
Or we keep our existing capture processes.
Yeah, you can keep your existing one today. That's not a problem. You know,
So those are the options. that we
Right.
have.
And it could, we could be looking at a phase 1, phase 2. Handle Predagio first, get that. I tell my customers all the time, let's crawl, walk, run. Crawl with that to walking. We get familiar with it, we understand the capabilities. You may have other ideas at that point, and we go look at that process and say, okay, we can automate that process by doing this, 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 and give you a couple of options. We do that with customers all the time. All the time.
20 minutes late for my meeting, so I'm
sorry. Thanks for staying. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So the one thing I didn't finish showing you guys is this search. So I just created this search form on the fly while we were talking about this stuff. And let's see if I can get there. Keyboard falls asleep. And so I'm just doing the same search that I did before, but in a new form that I just created. And you can see I get results. So this means that your end users can use this WYSIWYG interface to create a new search without having to bother IT. And it's powerful enough that if you want to get tricky and put in regular expressions or SQL queries or whatever, you can do that too. But you don't have to. You can just say, I want these fields. I want the results to look like this. I want to make this box this big. And I want it to have these fixed values for searches. And you build it, and now you have this. And then even now, I'm doing it as Sue right now, but if I want to, I can promote it to production ready. And without having to change systems, without any sort of technical review process at all, if you trust this user, now if I go in as Emma, I should be able to use this new search that I just created. So let me try that. Just, because I'm trying to show you how we can do search without bugging IT. And I should be clear, different users might have a different list of applications. You might have a certain user that can only get into one application and other ones that can get to other ones. So you can see I now have this new search that I just published for this user. Without any sort of, and it's all audited and recorded in a separate archive, right? I just wanted to show you that one. So let me go back to my review and we can have questions. There it is. So just to highlight the stuff that I covered, I could show you how you can search without IT with a pretty much zero training interface. It's very straightforward, just like any other search form on the internet. You don't have to bother IT even to create a new search on an archive. I have a UI that's out of the box, doesn't require any plugins, runs in all browsers, and is different depending upon the user's role. And it allows them to do their job in the archive without having to get really technical, without having to call IT, without having to open up the manual, right? And it's built to scale and to provide security and compliance, and you can put things in the cloud if you want to, even if you have an on-prem one. So I just wanted to review some of the things I showed